The first question you might ask yourself is, why am I talking to you about Gemini when we're discussing the creation of agents? So, discovering the gems that will be Gemini's agents instead of just going straight to ChatGPT and using their agents, which are also called GPTs? Well, quite simply, it's because ChatGPT is considered a very mainstream solution, so it tends to make more mistakes, more hallucinations. In other words, it makes up information when you ask it to do a task. And generally, professionals who are trying to create an agent are looking for precision and efficiency. That's why I recommend Gemini. As soon as you need to do a lot of analysis, like document analysis, comparing documents, or searching for information in Excel, Gemini is going to be very strong. On the other hand, it's important to understand that ChatGPT also has its strengths, and ChatGPT is very good at formatting and also at creativity. It's going to be very creative. So if you're doing a lot of marketing, a lot of sales efforts, then ChatGPT is going to be better. And also, ChatGPT is a bit ahead of Gemini when it comes to analyzing tabular data like Excel files. So if you have a lot of Excel files to go through, you should know that ChatGPT is going to be a bit better for that as well. So once again, it's a matter of balance, of knowing which environment you're in. But on the other hand, there's something else that's very important to understand. This concept of an agent is universal. So as soon as I say universal, for example, look, here I am in Gemini, I click, if I don't see this on the bar, discover gems here, I'm going to create a new gem, and we always have the same information being requested. So there's always a name and a description, which are fairly secondary, but I'll explain to you later why they're important for collaboration. But above all, there are the instructions, the tools, and what I call the knowledge zone. So there are always instructions, tools, and knowledge zones. The most important element, of course, is going to be the instructions. So instructions are absolutely everywhere. Look, if I show you a new tool where we're also going to create an agent called Perplexity, it will have exactly the same thing. So if I click on Perplexity, their agents won't be called GMs or GPTs, they'll be called spaces. And if I click on space here and then click on a new space, you also have, look at the instructions. This concept is truly universal. And that's why it's important, because there are plenty of tools that are highly specialized in their tasks, but that also allow you to create an agent. So, understanding what we're going to see today will give you a skill that will be useful in the long term. Because everyone has realized that agents are extremely useful for professionals and that the future of the tool needs to be built on them. So, Perplexity, JGPT, Gemini, and so on. So in short, what's going to be important, because JGPT has exactly the same interface, is the instruction. But you might ask me, how do I get started? For example, I was told that if I want to create an agent, there's a method, a structure to follow. You really need to assign a role and do prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is the ability to create well-structured messages for artificial intelligence. So the message, but in a very structured way. For example, you'll give it a role, you'll assign it a task, a mission, a format. That can be interesting. The method I've developed because in the end, once you start creating a lot, I mean a huge number of agents with average professionals, you realize several things. The thing is, having a structure that's too rigid, for example, like what I've found here, where you have a role, a task, a context, a format, and examples, that can be interesting, but only at a later stage. And I'll explain why. The simplest method today for creating highly effective agents, that's what I call personally the operating mode. There's another method that I invented called distillation, but for now we'll focus on the operating mode. It's simply about explaining in a very straightforward way to the AI, I'm going to give you this information, I'm going to give you this input data. You're going to do an analysis, create a report, you're going to produce something, you're going to do your job, and I expect to receive a result or a deliverable in a certain way. So this can be expressed in 36,000 different ways. But just to illustrate one method, by creating an agent in Gemini, because that's where we're really going to focus, I'm going to use words. I told it I'm going to give you the name of a sector. I expect you to produce an analysis, either a pastel analysis, and I want you to give me a report of at least 36,000 characters. This is to try to push it to produce for me more content in a table format with bold on the important elements. So the goal, once again, when we create agents, is not to make things more complicated, but simply to get started. And that is already a real major problem for professionals. It's that they tell themselves, no, but I'll just ask an AI to make me an agent for sector analysis or competitive analysis, which might sound nice, but the problem is that you won't have control over it. And you'll see why, in fact, having control And understanding what's happening with the AI is extremely important because right now I'm telling it I'm going to give you a sector and all that. So that's very good. I can now record, and again, don't worry, it's normal for this to go quickly. We'll do it together again. For now, I'm just introducing you to the concept. I have my agent, I've given it its operating procedure, so I'm going to give you the name of a sector. You're going to do an analysis like this one for me, and I expect you to give me that. So quite simply, and you'll see why this is important. So now I can tell it the sector of AI diagnostics and auditing in companies and how to integrate it properly. So here, I'm actually giving it what I promised, the name of a sector. I went a little further, but in any case, that's the idea. And now I'm going to get a first result. The goal at this point isn't just to say, okay, we're done, we've given the operating procedure. But it's really about extracting what's good and what's not from what the AI is going to produce. So that's something I talk about often. Whenever I write my prompts, whenever I speak, whenever I give trainings and all that about artificial intelligence, the goal isn't just to structure things to spend 10, 20, 30 minutes. On a prompt or with a prompt, it's more about generating and seeing what the artificial intelligence will come up with. Then to analyze and understand what is good and what isn't. And then to rework your prompt or rework your instruction, in this case, since we're creating an agent. So for me, what do I like here, for example? So it has properly followed my instructions. It's a rather long report, not 36,000 characters, but it still allowed it to push itself a bit further. The problem is that in the tables that are going to be generated, sure, it's interesting, but I don't have any sources. I don't have any information to justify what's been said. And even worse, it's not data driven. So personally, I really like data. I really like justifying things with statistics. Here, I realize that actually I don't have the source, and at the same time, I don't have any data. So what do? I go back to the instructions once I've explained my approach. If I see something that I explained poorly, for example, the name of a sector or a specialty or its impact or its relationship with a certain type of activity, then I can go back to the approach section. But if I realize that there are things that are good or not so good, I add what I call extensions. So here, look, I just add a dash. It's so that it's more readable for me, not connected in any way. But here, for example, I can tell it, all the information you collect should mostly be truly data-driven. So based on data, with lots of statistics and information about why it's important and how it fits into the market. And now I can add my second extension, which will be, whenever you present information or data, I expect you to justify it with a source. And here, in fact, I've added what I was missing. So again, it's just an expression of my needs. It's, as a professional, I need to have statistics. I need to be able to justify what I'm talking about. I'm simply explaining to the AI what I need. And so here, in this case, I'm just going to click here to make sure it has properly updated its brain. I'm going to start a conversation. I'm asking it exactly the same question, and you'll see the difference. And that's what's important to understand with these agents. It's an iterative tool. A lot of people see it as a definitive tool, especially as soon as you ask an artificial intelligence to act as the agent for you. The instructions are so long, so uncontrollable for the average professional or even for someone experienced in AI that in the end, these tools don't grow, they don't evolve, they're kind of stuck in place. But what we ultimately see, as you can see here, is a lot more data. The sources, I have IBM, Global AI, Adoption Index, and all that. It's really about understanding what the AI is going to produce, seeing what it has understood well, what it hasn't understood, and then simply adding extensions to explain your needs. For me, my need was to have information, data-driven, which is by no means genius, just explaining what I need, and then integrating them into the instructions. So here I keep watching. It's interesting. But here, for example, I see that it tells me, note the 4000 format and all that. I'm not a big fan of it specifying that to me, so I'll do one last extension to show you what it does. Then we can continue. But this is really the most important element. We simply explain the operating procedure. There's no need to complicate things. To tell you the truth, I started making things a lot more complicated last year. We lost a lot of professionals in the integration of AI. Today, the simpler we make it, the more effective it is, the more control the professional has over the tool, the better the results will be. So here I continue. Look, I'm coming back. I said I didn't like the ending. And at the same time here, it's suggesting integration and recommendations to me. I like this, so what am I going to do? I'm going to go back into my instructions, so you can see that my agent is right here. I can click on it. If I don't see it, here I go to discover likes and I drop them here. I can find it again. I click on the little pencil here, or otherwise I just click on edit. And now I can go back inside. So once again, here I have my extensions. We get it. I add other extensions. So what I do is just drag them to make it more readable. And now I'll be able to add more. Under no circumstances should you say hello to me or explain things to me, comma. Explaining things to me, you see, that's bad work. Saying hello to me or agreeing that my prompt is good, comma. And under no circumstances should you talk about the format by saying we did not stick to 36,000 characters. That's not tolerated. And now I'll be able to tell it the element I considered, which was pretty good. At the end of your analysis, I want you to suggest 10 next points we could address in 3 different categories. I could have said 9 to make it more balanced. All right, 9 it is. So by doing this, I'm updating it. You'll see nothing complicated. What did I do actually? I just expressed a little bit of what I wanted. And what I'm going to do, actually, what we're going to do together is that I'm going to explain to you, give you a few tips on what works, what are the best extensions to use. You'll see it's going to be really, really easy to integrate. I'm just going back to the previous conversation to use exactly the same prompt to do a test to see if this AI in the end gives a different result. I'm giving it exactly the same prompt, so the AI audit diagnostic for companies. This year it goes deeper examination, so at least this time it didn't say, that's a great idea, hello, and all that. At least we avoided that. You've got some points, that's not bad. SWOT analysis, we're still on something that's really good. I feel like it lost me a bit. The sources, no, it does mention the sources. So I could have specified, if you prefer, add sources in another column, because here it puts them after. But again, it's this back and forth, this testing process. We dig in and keep control over the tool. Now we continue with the pestle analysis. And what interests me now are the next steps. Diagnostics. I'm checking if that's it, so there, I've got them. Next topic to explore in depth. Category A, compliance and risk, performance and ROI, that's pretty good. Organization, organizational and human aspects. So let's say I'm really going to focus on the organization side of the AI King. I copy and I tell it, redo your work. We could be more polite. Sorry, now continue on this topic. You can see there you go, and we keep moving forward. And actually, this tool grows with me. It grows with my needs. So there you go. Now I've shown you how I would create for myself an agent. You can see it's really not complicated. There are methods that could take you a lifetime, but that's not the goal. The goal is really to get a result that speaks to you, that's effective for you. As you can see, this method of operating mode, which is not complicated at all, is I give you, you do, and I want you to give me this. And finally, this little extension technique, which really is very, very simple and understandable by everyone, and it works. So look, a question and all that. So I'll leave you with that. And the next step will be to create your own agent.